Hello everyone, this is Kat. Welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the start of a new fic series entitled Swallow the Stars. Here's the summary. Freshly escaped from a research laboratory where he was raised and experimented on, Izuku tries to figure out who he is and how he fits into their world, all while being the host of an eldritch god with incredible power. Luckily, a perpetually tired hero and his best friend are more than willing to parent Izuku and guide him on the way to becoming a hero. This fic is 46 chapters with just shy of 250,000 words. I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 1. Broken Memories. Rain sloshes in torrents against the swell of the curb, the slanting sidewalk, the rough stretch of pavement that directs the flow of nighttime traffic. The street is unfamiliar. Everything is static, static, static. A fuzzy little noise in the back of his head that distorts time and feelings and thoughts into shapeless gray maw. He registers things vaguely, though the rain is prominent, because it's making him wet and echoing against the storefronts and buildings and walls, the sound just increasing the static behind his eyes. He knows he's a person. He doesn't feel like a person, like someone with a beating heart and sense of time and memories to guide him. None of the thoughts in his head are working together, dancing one way and then pulling another. For a long time, probably, maybe. It's hard to tell when everything is bathed in rain and static and in inky black smoke that flickers in the corner of his eyes. He feels fragile and easily torn apart, but gradually things seem to settle, getting steadier with each shivering breath he pulls into his lungs. Everything pieces together slowly. The first thing he feels, confirms as real, is damp clothes pressed into his skin, clinging and tight and cold and awful. Too much feeling all at once, leaving him altogether numb for it. He registers his limbs after that, knees bent up to his chest and arms circled tightly around them. He feels small. His form is small, but is that right? He's a person, maybe, supposedly, but he's pretty sure that he's supposed to be vast and awful and wretched and strong, but this form is weak and trembling and cold, and he wants to expand and consume the entire kid. Startled by the voice, his hands immediately snap closed into fists on reflex. The crash of anger and power that had been coating him seeps away. Gradually his eyes trail upwards, squinting against the rain to take in the man standing in front of him. Black boots lead to black pants and a black shirt, and long black hair, interrupted only by a billowy light gray scarf that drapes his shoulders and hides half of his face from view. "What are you doing out here?" The man doesn't emphasize the rain or the lack of an umbrella or both of them. He looks distracted and also on edge, maybe suspicious of a child sitting alone in the dark on a rain-slick street, maybe just concerned in the midst of whatever turmoil is held behind his ribcage. I don't know. He really doesn't. How he got here is an impossible question to answer because he has no idea. He's sure that the memory is floating around in his head somewhere, but nothing else comes to him. It's just static. And pain? Yes, pain. He doesn't want to remember anything if it's just going to hurt him to do so. A pause. "What's your name, kid?" His name. The static comes back hard and fast, gushing and spilling over his arms until he is clenching his fists so tight his fingernails dig into his palms. Izuku, he finally says, spitting the name out onto the wet pavement like a dead fish. He doesn't understand the vague humor that circles the back of his brain, and he decides that he doesn't want to. The name feels correct but also incorrect, a truth he wasn't aware of until the static told him. "Izuku, you got a family name?" There's impatience underscoring the otherwise impersonal tone in the man's voice, just a toe over the line that separates apathy from empathy. No. He's sure of that. He doesn't have any family, so he can't have a family name. The name Izuku doesn't even really feel right. Like, it's some sort of joke or falsehood or deception, but it's probably close enough to the truth. It at least feels somewhat correct. But there's nothing but emptiness at the prodding for a second name. Clearly the man in black wasn't expecting that answer. He frowns, or at least his tone suggests a frown. "What do you mean now? Are you an orphan?" Something about the word orphan rings untrue, speaks of abandonment, or untimely death, or both. A giving away or a dumping on the side of the road. He knows that people raised him, knows that he was fed and clothed and hurt. Mercy killings and nothing but empty screams. Izuku closes his eyes and shakes his head. His lower lip is trembling. No, I don't know. I don't think so. Blood pools in his palms around his fingers and seeps into his wet pants. Static surrounds him and promises a soft landing, but the sound of shifting limbs and clothes pulls his eyes back open and forces him to focus on the man in front of him. There's no tension in the man's shoulders, but his eyes are tight and focused. He looks tired, dark smudges under his eyes, a good show of his lack of sleep. "Okay, kid," he says at length, a sigh the only color to his tone. "My name's Aizawa Shota. You can call me Aizawa if you want. No honorifics needed, okay? Let's get you out of the rain." He offers his hand, but before Izuku can reach for him, a sudden movement and noise down the street grabs both of their attentions. "Hey, we found 15!" a woman shouts, pointing from where she'd stopped right at the edge of the street. The man next to her charges forward without pause, and something in Izuku clenches in fear and anger, recognizing the orange cube that springs to life around the man's hand. He has no idea how he knows these people, but he knows that he doesn't want to be anywhere near them. Izuku scrambles to his feet, chest heaving, not sure if he should run toward or away from the people following him. Fight or flee. His fists tighten, the static rising in frequency as the woman starts singing, her voice slowly filling the street and trying to drown him. Aizawa is still by the building, and he's on his feet now, staring between Izuku and the people coming at him. He says something, and his hair rises around his head and his glowing red irises, but Izuku only hears static, his brain trying to decide on something that his body already seems sure about. He doesn't know where he's seen these people before, and that scares him because he knows who they are, knows that they hurt him over and over and over and over. Break their bones. Break their bones. Break their bones. "He's going to fucking kill you." The cube in the charging man's hand grows larger, his arm rearing back like he's going to throw it. Aizawa shouts something, but Izuku can't see him, doesn't know who the words are for. The static in his head reaches a fever pitch of white noise, and the pressure in his chest and arms and skull becomes too much, too much, too much. He throws out both hands, palms forward and open, and strength, power, freedom, freedom. Something inky and black and massive shoots forward. Izuku screams, and he feels like his bones are rearranging over and over to accommodate something too large under his own skin. He's in his body, but he's not. Consciousness and physical understanding split between the body of the boy he thinks himself to be and the monstrous roiling of horror that rips itself from his skin. There is an overwhelming surge of pain, and then a distance from it all. He vaguely registers some feeling in his limbs, but when he concentrates too hard, he realizes that the number of limbs is too many. He shouldn't have so many arms. He stops thinking about it. The pain is still there, but he thinks the danger is gone now. There's not much sound, just that ocean of crackling static, and Izuku thinks that he could float here forever, drowning in physical pain but weirdly not minding it. But he remembers Aizawa, offering him a helping hand, soaking in the rain. Would he still be there? Izuku should check. He should make sure that Aizawa's okay. It's an offhanded thought, but he pushes it against the fringes of his consciousness, ignoring the bones around him that aren't his own, the flesh that isn't really flesh, and the oily black blood that dribbles down, or maybe out of, his open mouth and throat. He's exhausted. It's exhausted. They're exhausted. The dissolving of the black bones' flesh blood happens faster than its appearance. Izuku takes a single wobbly step into the pavement before dropping to his knees. He's in the middle of the street, and there aren't any cars, so he doesn't feel pressure to leave just yet. Static fills him, enhanced by the pounding rain. When he looks at the pavement, it's red, coated in blood that's gradually being washed away. Dead, 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 powerful, strong, fierce. Izuku. He leans back, the weight of his body resting on the heels of his feet, and he rolls his head to the side so that he can look at Aizawa, who's unhurt, thank God, standing in the street staring at him with nothing shy of shock and fear. "Aizawa," Izuku croaks, his throat feeling both rough and thick, as if something clawed and slimy had crawled up his esophagus. What happened?" Gradually, pieces of short-term memory click into place, and his eyes sweep back over the street in front of him. The blood on the pavement, the scattered limbs and pieces of flesh that didn't seem to click in his brain the first time. There's rubble, too, from long scars carved into the street. Through the static, threatening to eat him alive, he realizes that there are sirens nearby getting ever closer. Aizawa walks steadily forward, his eyes red and dry, irritated from something, maybe allergies. Had they looked like that before? Izuku can't remember. and kneels down beside him. "Are you okay?" he asks instead of answering, and it sounds like fear and worry and piles of uncertainty, but he sets a hand on Izuku's shoulder despite what he must have just seen. Izuku turns his eyes down to his hands, clenched into fists once more, and he pressed them tight into his thighs. He feels faint. "Don't let my palms open," he whispers, though he doesn't really know why. It just seems right, accurate, a detail accumulated amongst the static. "Hey, kid. Izuku." Aizawa tries and fails to keep his attention. With one last slow sweep of his gaze around the street in front of him, Izuku passes out. Shota catches the kid by the shoulders as he slumps forward, quickly gathering him back to his chest before his face can hit the pavement. Fuck. And he's even smaller when Shota holds him. Short, yes, and young, obviously, but also thin and weak. And after what he'd just seen, yeah, he's quick to follow the kid's advice and wrap his capture weapon over Izuku's palms, keeping his fingers closed against them, for good measure. He looks up once the boy is safely tucked against him, listening for his breathing, feeling for a pulse to just double-check, because something huge, dark, and horrible had just ripped its way out of Izuku's skin, and that, if it's a quirk, Shota's erasure hadn't done a single damn thing to stop it, which means... Fuck. He can think about this later. The street is bloody. There are body parts, just pieces, really, and hardly enough to make even one full person, let alone the two that had started at the end of the street, strewn all over the place, and sirens are getting closer by the second. Every part of Shota's training wants him to stay, to have a conversation with the police, to get this boy to a hospital, but the feral fear that had been in Izuku's eyes seconds before that thing exploded out of him convinces Shota that he can do all of that later. Everything is going to have to be later. Right now, he has an unconscious boy to take care of and keep safe, and if years of polishing his instincts and teaching students have taught him nothing else, it's that, at least, he knows how to listen when a kid says that they're in danger, with or without so many words. So, careful as to keep Izuku cradled in his arms and tucked against his chest, Aizawa stands and, fucking Christ, for all that that kid is tiny, he's heavy as hell, walks away from the crime scene and the pulverized bodies that had been whole and breathing and attacking a child moments ago. He breaks into a slow jog after there's a few streets between them and there, between Izuku and the people who wanted to hurt him, between Shota's racing mind and the thing he doesn't want to think about right now. They're nowhere near his apartment. He doesn't like to patrol where he lives, lest it give villains an idea of where to look for him, so they're going to have to catch a late train. Thankfully, he doesn't have to look at his phone to know the schedule, since he's here often enough and never takes anything but the late train back home. When the train station comes into view, it's just an open-air platform out here, way past the edge of the city's heart. Shota sits and rearranges Izuku in his lap. The boy, thankfully, stays asleep and nestles closer to Shota's chest despite his rain-soaked clothes. Sighing, Shota brings out his phone to make a call. "Shota, dear!" Nemuri's voice is light despite the late hour. "What?" "Sorry, Nem. I don't have time for pleasantries. I need a favor." He wishes he could rub his eyes or put his eye drops or anything in, but with one hand on the phone and the other supporting Izuku, all he can do is squint across the platform and try to convince himself that every shadow he sees isn't going to jump out and kill him. "I need you to take my patrol for the rest of the night." "Oh?" This gets Nemuri's attention, and Shota can imagine her sitting up straighter as worry laces her tone. "What happened?" Shota clicks his tongue against his teeth. "I don't know how to explain it, even if I thought it would be safe to do so over the phone, which I don't, so you're going to have to wait for an explanation later." The silence stretches for only a moment before Nemuri says, "All right, but you owe me." "I know." He hangs up before the conversation can move forward beyond there, carefully types out the details of tonight's specific route to her and sends it through text. After a moment of hesitation, he adds that she should stay away from the street that he'd found Izuku on, whether or not the police are still there when she arrives. Then he makes another phone call. "Shota, it's late." Hizashi's voice is a low and murmured one, a clear sign that at least one of his hearing aids is out. "I need a favor." God, he knows he's probably going to owe a lot of favors after tonight. I need you to go to a store and pick up clothes that would fit maybe 8 or 9-year-old boy." A moment, and then, "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" Shota holds back a sigh by reminding himself that he would be just as confused and asking as many questions as he possibly could if the roles were reversed. "Are you asking because you didn't hear me or because you're surprised?" Hizashi laughs, and it's a strained and nervous thing. "Shota, did you kidnap a kid or something?" He would prefer the term rescue, but technically, I suppose. A string of low swear words is all Shota can hear for a moment, but he waits his friend out, knowing he'll come around. Finally, "What kind of clothes?" "Thank you," Shota says, getting it out of the way. "Something loose. T-shirt, sweatpants. Pair up a couple of each if you want. I'll pay you back." He looks up and down the street, not sensing anyone watching them, but wanting to make sure. "I'm waiting for the train. Meet me at my place, and I'll explain everything I can when I get there." He hangs up again, pockets his phone. There'll be more calls to make, but that's for later, too. Right now there's a child in his arms, and Shota's tired of talking to people. Shota brings his hand down to Izuku's face, pushing thick, inky hair out of his eyes. He's incredibly pale, veins stark on his eyelids and a smattering of freckles, so dark that Shota initially thinks there are splatters of mud. Over his cheeks and nose, he's just as soaked through as Shota is, an outfit like hospital scrubs, paper-thin and clinging to his slight frame. In his sleep, Izuku's brow furrows, and a quiet noise escapes his lips. Shota shushes him and tucks him in closer, the instinct to protect and soothe taking over as he smooths out the wrinkles with his thumb and starts rocking his body slowly. It takes a moment, but Izuku's breathing eventually evens back out, and he settles down with a quiet sigh. When the train arrives, they're the only passengers. It's not a long ride back to his apartment, but the time seems to stretch out infinitely anyway. He keeps checking to make sure Izuku's still asleep and not outwardly showing signs of nightmares or pain or worse. Shota has to keep himself busy, rocking slowly, rubbing Izuku's arms when he starts to shiver in the air conditioning of the train, to keep that thread of nervous energy from earlier out of his system. He doesn't want to think about what the fuck he just witnessed, though he knows he's going to have to eventually. But it can wait. It can all wait. Whatever turmoil and panic he's going to have to get over can all be put aside until Izuku is safe in his apartment. When his stop rolls around, Shota readjusts his grip on Izuku and steps off the train. There are a few people in the station, but no one pays him any mind. Maybe because he glares at anyone who so much as glances at him, maybe because they're all used to seeing him on his way home after patrol. From the station, it's only a short walk to his apartment. He finds Hisashi waiting for him outside, despite the fact that he has a key and could let himself in. Hisashi's eyes are tired, but they move over Shota and Izuku in a quick way that takes in as much detail as possible with the short amount of time that it takes for Shota to mount the stairs. Wordlessly, Hisashi opens the door and Shota follows him inside. "Let's just tell him off for now," Shota says, kicking the door closed and sidestepping whichever cat has come to trip him. "I don't want to push some boundary that I don't know is there." "Jesus, Sho, what the fuck happened?" Shota's jaw clenches, not out of annoyance at his friend, but because of the memories that he's trying to push aside. "Later, once he's dry, I can't right now." Already that nervousness is back, that solid streamline of what the fuck, but he chokes it back and stomps down on it hard. Hisashi looks at him, eyes sharp behind his glasses. "Okay," he says, stopping to put a hand on Shota's shoulder. "Okay, Shota. Breathe. We'll take care of the kid first. He's safe. Take a breath. It's all right." Hisashi goes for a deep inhale, eyes locked with Shota's, and Shota falls into the rhythm that he sets. "Fuck," Shota says with as much feeling as he can, once he no longer feels like he's going to crack in half. "Just fuck." Izuku stirs in his arms, drawing both of their attention down to him, but it's one of those small noises again, as he buries his face in Shota's arm. Hisashi meets Shota's gaze again, tender and concerned, and they get to work. The first thing they do, at Shota's insistence, is wrap Izuku's palms in white bandages. It's careful work. Unwind one, rotation of the capture weapon, and immediately cover it with bandages. He leaves Izuku's fingers free this time, though that just makes him wince at the exposed bloody crescents in his palms, from where he must have dug in his fingernails. Those get carefully cleaned and then given an extra layer of bandages. He doesn't think about the tattoos on Izuku's palms, thick lines of pitch black on the right and thin little strips of blood red on the left, both making a unique pattern that Shota doesn't recognize. He doesn't want to know what they mean right now. The second thing they do is undress Izuku and gently towel him off. Under the scrubs, they find scars upon scars, and in the process of toweling off Izuku's hair, Hisashi finds a tiny tattoo of the number 15, hidden in his hairline. Shota feels a gut-wrenching rage and devastation that he thinks might just be enough to raise the entire city, but then Izuku, still thankfully asleep, grabs at Shota's shirt, and he has to take a deep, calming breath. Getting angry right now isn't going to solve anything. There'll be bridges to cross, pushback that he's going to have to plan for, an investigation that he wants to kickstart right fucking now, but for the moment, he just needs to focus on the child in front of him. Izuku doesn't let go of Shota's shirt the rest of the time it takes to dry him off. He doesn't wake up despite it all, which, honestly, is a bit concerning, but for now it's convenient, so Shota doesn't worry about it too much. It's equally concerning how easy it is to break Izuku's grip on his shirt when they need to dress him again, but Shota is distracted from his negative thoughts as a soft chuckle comes from Hisashi. He's already made up his mind about who his favorite is, huh? Just the ridiculousness of that statement startles a smile out of Shota and reminds him exactly why he called Hisashi here instead of Nemuri. I think we should let him meet you first, before we completely write off the possibility of him liking you. Hisashi winks and gets to his feet, helping Shota off the bathroom floor as well. No one ever said anything about him not liking me. What's not to like? Hisashi holds out his arms, his intention clear before he even speaks. Now, pass the little listener over. You need to shower, and get a change of clothes, and he doesn't look like he's going to wake up anytime soon. Don't say that. Don't jinx us like that. But Shota steps into Hisashi's space and works through the careful process of swapping out arms to support the kid. Oof! Hisashi's breath puffs out and then seems to stop entirely for a moment as he adjusts to Izuku's weight. What the fuck? Where's all this weight coming from? Shota grimaces. I think I have an idea. I'll explain. Later, yeah. Hisashi interrupts, watching as Shota pulls Izuku's fingers out of the knots that they'd made of Shota's shirt. Izuku's brow furrows for a moment, and his mouth pulls down, but he doesn't wake. In the span of his next breath, he shifts his torso and snuggles into Hisashi's chest. Take your shower. I'll make tea once I put him down on the sofa. Coffee. Shota counters, taking a step back to open up the doorway. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I don't think I could. Hisashi nods, easily accepting of Shota's demands, and then steps over the threshold and disappears into the living room. Shota watches as both of his cats, who had been waiting at the end of the hall, trot after Hisashi before he closes the bathroom door and starts up the shower. He washes off in record time, not caring about getting clean so much as just getting warm. He quickly slips into his bedroom for a change of clothes. Coco is waiting for him on the bed, the tortoiseshell cat switching her bobbed tail with something that's clearly judgment. Don't look at me like that, he says, rubbing a hand over her head before pulling on a set of black sweatpants and a sweater. He's not leaving if I can help it, so you'd better get used to him. Coco meows at him in her raspy tone, sounding a lot like she's been smoking a pack of cigarettes every day for the last 30 years. Then she blinks and jumps off the bed, leading the way out of his room with her short tail tilted up. With a shake of his head, Shota follows after her. He finds Hisashi sitting at the dining room table, cup of coffee in front of him and another placed across the table for Shota. And as much as the promise of caffeine tempts Shota to the kitchen, he swings into the living room first to check on Izuku. Not because he doesn't trust Hisashi to watch after him, but just because, God, Shota's just seen too much tonight. He just needs to make sure that the kid's safe. Izuku's fast asleep on the sofa, a blanket tucked up to his chin, mostly dry now. His dark hair has a distinct green sheen to it, and the light drifting from the kitchen. He's still too pale, but he has a bit of a flush to his cheeks now that he's warming up, and his breathing is even. Coco has taken up a position laying across his legs, her sign of approval, and Leo, an unreasonably large orange cat, is purring on Izuku's chest. Satisfied, Shota joins Hisashi at the table. He can still see Izuku perfectly from here, and he's glad, not for the first time, that Hisashi knows him so well. So, Hisashi's the first to start, his tone leading like he wants Shota to pick up the story. You kidnapped a child and brought him home. Shota decides to start at the beginning. I was on my route up in the north, at the edge of the city. Hisashi nods. They know each other's patrol rotations, if not exact routes, quite well, Nemuri included just in case of emergencies. There was an explosion at a research facility, I think. I wasn't near it, but I could see it from the rooftop I was on. Half of a fucking building blew up. It was a mess. Huge flames, lots of rubble. He shakes his head and looks over at Izuku, watching Leo shift with each rise and fall of the kid's chest. I started running over there, obviously to see if I could help. It was raining hard, and I was worried about chemical fires and civilians, even though that's so far outside of his purview and pay grade. But I turned a corner, and the street was suddenly just empty. Hisashi, there was no one. No cars, no traffic, no pedestrians, fucking dead. Hisashi frowns, brow furrowed in thoughtfulness and confusion. No way in hell are the streets so quiet after an explosion. Had to be a quirk at play. Shota takes a sip of his coffee, and then just holds the mug between his palms for the warmth. The next street over I found Izuku. He gestures toward the kid, just a sweep of his fingers. Fuck, Hisashi. He was in a fetal position against the side of a building, barely aware of his surroundings. I asked him questions, and he only knew the answer to one, his name. And even then, just his given name, no surname that he knows of. Didn't even know how he got there. Didn't know what was going on, didn't seem to care at all about the explosion or the rain or any of it. You thought the lack of pedestrians was him? Hisashi asks, incredibly quiet and serious. Shota nods. He's young. Quirk accidents happen. I thought that he might have had something happen that puts people to sleep, or I don't know. I really don't. And I wasn't even thinking about the explosion, but now I'm not so sure. The explosion? And Izuku? He'll get back to that. 2 people came running around the corner, just down one street. One of them had something in his hand, glowing orange. I think it was his quirk, but it could have easily just have been a weapon. And the other started singing, definitely a quirk, because I started to feel bizarrely relaxed when the words got going, and Izuku... Fuck. He takes a deep breath, steadying himself. Oh, he's going to need a therapy appointment after this. He'll call tomorrow. He panicked. I've been around a lot of kids, Hisashi, and I've never seen panic like that. He recognized those people, knew they were going to hurt him, and... I don't know how to say this in another way. He transformed. Shota does his best to describe what he saw, the massive darkness bursting out of Izuku's body that had form but didn't. It seemed larger than could possibly be comprehended, but at the same time, probably less than 3 meters tall. He does his best to describe the white noise and the reaching gesture that the creature had made before the people just exploded. Hisashi, they just fucking vaporized. It was 2 bodies, and then it was blood in tiny pieces. Shota shudders, closing his eyes against the graphic memory. He's seen a lot, and this is not technically the worst in his opinion, but it's definitely fucking up there. A transformation mutation quirk. Hisashi muses, probably not fixating on the details on purpose. His eyes trail over to Izuku in the living room. Or just a complicated emitter quirk. No. Shota's voice is sharp, and it makes Hisashi look at him immediately. I had my quirk activated to shut down the fucking singing. Hisashi blinks once, twice, slowly, as he processes that information. It's not a quirk? They both know, are perfectly painfully aware, that the only types of quirks Shota can't stop are the ones that are part of someone's body. Mutant quirks like extra arms or a tail or a pair of wings, but this wasn't that. Izuku is clearly a boy with 2 arms, no tail, no wings, and he had been ripped apart into something far too large for his skin. That's why I'm thinking that he and the explosion at the research facility are linked. Shota says, voice calm again as he brings his cup to his lips, but his chest is raging. He wants to track down whoever thought it would be a good idea to experiment on children and wring their fucking necks. Numerous scars that speak of surgeries and IVs, and, in a few instances, obvious broken bones litter Izuku's body. Then there's the tattoo that is so clearly a mark of identification that Shota wants to chant the name Izuku over and over until the kid doesn't think of himself as anything but. And on top of it all, the crescent stab wounds from fingernails, the blood dripping down clenched fingers, the lack of any sort of acknowledgement of the pain. Pain that Izuku gave himself so that he wouldn't hurt anyone else. Hisashi sighs quietly and leans forward in his chair. One hand is loosely cupped around his coffee, while the other supports his chin. So what's the plan then, Sho? He asks, looking up with slightly askew glasses. He might have a really nightmarish power that isn't a quirk, or at least isn't a quirk that we've seen before. He's probably been experimented on his whole life, if he came from that research facility. Shota watches Hisashi's face twist in distaste as he talks, and he understands that Hisashi is feeling much the same as Shota is. They're both too smart to think that Izuku could have come from anywhere else. But he's safe now, Hisashi continues. So how do we keep him that way? And isn't that the million-yen question? Holding in what feels like his hunter's sigh of the night, Shota closes his eyes, letting himself hang in the gentle reassurance of that we, for as long as he needs to. It helps him calm down. This is not how he expected his night to go, not in his wildest imagination. And he'd never had any desire to raise a child outside of his students that he teaches, because he does raise those monsters, and they are his children for better or worse, but he's not about to throw Izuku into a situation where he could easily end up back in the hands of the people who hurt him. I'm going to call Nezu, he says, much as he doesn't exactly relish the idea of a late-night discussion with the rat. He knows that it's uncharacteristic of him to seek out an audience with the principal, and he can see Hisashi's confusion, so he elaborates. If anyone is going to have advice on how to handle a kid that has probably been experimented on, it's going to be Nezu. And then I'm going to call Tsukuchi because there's going to be a veritable mountain of paperwork to fill out and backdate. And he already owes me a couple of favors. He pauses, considering, and his eyes slide back over to Izuku. That is, of course, if Izuku wants to stay. Hisashi reaches out and cups his hand around Shota's on his cup of coffee. Steam billows out between them, and a private smile takes over Hisashi's whole face. One thing at a time, then. Shota nods. One thing at a time. All right, everyone. This concludes the first chapter of Swallow the Stars. I hope you all enjoyed this fic. This is one of my favorites that I do go back and reread a lot. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to Chapter 1, and as always, thank you so much for listening.